Welcome in, everybody. Another edition of the First and Orange podcast. Parker Gabriel here, Ryan McFadden there, Broncos beat reporters at the Denver Post. Ryan, it is game week, finally.
Finally, it feels like it's gone by like to get here is gone by fast, but at the same time, it's like the August was just it felt like a drag too.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was talking to Davis Webb yesterday for a story that's running this weekend in the Post. Obviously, Broncos quarterbacks coach. And as we were sitting down, I just said, "How you doing, man?" And he said, "Exhausted." I was like, "Yeah, no doubt. Like that's the way it goes this year. It's like time melts by, and then also, like it also feels like it's an eternity between the start of camp and the start of the regular season. So we finally made it. We're recording this on Friday morning. There's already one NFL game in the books. Sorry to say, Ryan, the Ravens came half a toe short last night against Kansas City. We got the Packers and Eagles in Brazil tonight. We are legitimately off and running on the NFL season.
Yeah, and last night was a great start. A really good game between the Ravens and the Chiefs. Not the result I was looking for, but it's whatever.
It is, and it's. I mean, just like we could talk about this for 30 minutes probably, but not only maybe the two best quarterbacks in football right now, but two guys that will go down as among the best to ever do it in Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. But they have 5 MVPs between them already, and neither of them are 30 yet. So and also, by the way, programming note, back-to-back road games for the Broncos in the middle of the season, weeks 9 and 10, back-to-back Baltimore and Kansas City. Way before that, though, season opens Sunday afternoon in Seattle. We'll both be there. So will Troy Rank, our enterprising columnist at the Denver Post. Aaron Ontiveros, extremely talented photographer. We'll have full coverage from Lumen Field up in Seattle. So, Ryan, let's get right to it. I mean, and let's just start with Bo Nix. There's obviously a lot of anticipation, a lot of excitement from fans. And at the same time, Troy wrote about this yesterday, like rookie quarterbacks in general tend to have a tough time. They really have a tough time in season openers. Here's a trivia question for you. Who's the last first-round rookie to win week 1?
I think is it Sam Darnold?
It is Sam Darnold. You are a football genius, sir. But 2018, since then, 0 wins, 7 losses, 1 tie. We've seen an uptick the last couple of years in rookies that get the call right from the start. There was a lot, like Baker Mayfield. It was like 2 weeks and then he started. I think Herbert was 1 and then he started. Broncos aren't messing around with that. They're going right to Bo Nix. And so, like, Ryan, how much do you think, and we've been talking to people about this all week, how much do you think the crowd noise and the atmosphere and just being on the road at Seattle, matters in this equation? And what do you think is realistic expectations for Bo Nix first time out as an NFL starter?
Oh, I think it's going to have an impact because it's not like you're not only one thing. It's like it's a one thing about like you have the crowd noise. You're going to one of the most hostile environments in the NFL. At the same time, it is your first start. So any rookie jitters you would have, whether you're home or away, it's still going to be there. So mix that in with the environment that's in Seattle. He might feel it early on. I think he's going to have a modest performance. I won't be surprised. You might be seeing something where it's like it's not good. I don't think he's going to have a performance that's going to just blow it out the water and just have everyone saying he's a future Hall of Famer. It might be a situation where it's like 220 yards, 215 yards, maybe a touchdown or two. He's going to have a modest performance, but it's like with the Seattle team, it's like so many unknowns, especially like with first-year head coach Mike McDonald. You knew what he did in Baltimore. Like he had one of the best defenses in the league. They're very good with their pressures and getting at the quarterback and bringing in different looks to keep them off balance. But how will that work with the personnel he has in Seattle? There's no Roquan Smith, there's no Madubuike, no Kyle Hamilton. So it's like how would his defensive scheme translate to Seattle? So that's going to be interesting to see. But I think I'm looking at a modest performance from Bo Nix. I think you're going to see some rookie jitters from the beginning, but I think he's going to settle down and have an okay performance.
Yeah, I was talking to someone last night actually about this, and it's super interesting, like especially because it's Mike McDonald's first time out as a head coach, and obviously it's his defense. Aiden Dirty is the defensive coordinator, and then they have a first year offensive coordinator too in Ryan Grubb. So it's new new across the board in Seattle. But the thing with Mike McDonald is, like the Broncos they've gone back through the Baltimore stuff. Sean Payton sort of like wouldn't. He was asked if do you go back and even look at like when McDonald was at Michigan with Jim Harbaugh, and it was like he was like, oh, it just depends on how far back you want to go, which sounded to me like they'd probably at least looked at it. But it's almost immaterial. The thing is, both teams have sort of the first mover advantage, right? Like McDonald, he knows what he's done in Baltimore. And so then the question is like, how much do you just keep rolling with that? And how much do you try to bait a young quarterback who wants to be ready, who really prides himself on being ready? How much do you play the mind game with him about showing him things the way it looked maybe in Baltimore, or things that you could have found in film, and then changing it and trying to, bait the trap and say, okay, he's going to think it's this, but it's really this. And so, that happens every week in the NFL. That's life at the highest level. But you have sort of like an elevated ability to do that in week ones in general, and especially in this week one because of how much new there is. And frankly, like Denver has some of that advantage too. They can, Sean Payton undoubtedly isn't just blindly like, this is what I've always done, this is what we're doing in Bo's first start too. And so it's going to be fascinating. Like the chess match is going to be really interesting. And then I agree with you. I mean, you talked to some of the veterans today, like, or this week, like Mike McGlinchey said, we're working on silent count and all that, but like, there's a lot of other stuff to do too. You can't spend the whole week obsessing on how loud it's going to be. So it's fascinating. The crowd's going to be juiced. Probably won't be quite as feral as it was 2 years ago for Russell Wilson's return up there, but it sets up similarly, I think, where you just don't quite know, where exactly their team's starting the year, and that makes it a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a close game. I think it's gonna be interesting because you don't know what Mike McDonald's defense will like in Seattle. At the same time, Mike McDonald doesn't look. What does a Bo Nix led offense truly look like? So it's like it feels like everyone is going into Seattle a little bit blind, and at the same time, we don't know not just Bo Nix, but there's a lot of pieces on both sides of the ball. You do not know what you're going to get from them. Yeah. What are we going to expect from Marvin Mims going into year two? Raleigh Moss is about to start his start at cornerback. How's that going to look? How's it going to look when they're going to push the ball in his direction just to avoid Pat Surtain? So those are certain things like you truly don't. And then you got Luke Waterberger as safety. So center.
That would be bad if they played him at safety.
It's been a long month. I'll say that. Yeah, so it's just so many unknowns with both sides of the ball, and it's like you truly don't know what to expect. But there's one thing for certain, that Mike McDonald is a really good defensive coach, and you expect that he is going to do some things to test Bo Nix.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're spot on, and it's just going to be a feel out, for a while. And I was talking to DJ Jones yesterday in the locker room, defensive tackle, obviously, and he's played Seattle a lot. 2 years ago was his first game as a Bronco up there, but before that he played for San Francisco, so he's playing them twice a year, going to Seattle every year. And he said he thinks it's going to be kind of weird because he's always thought of it as he's always associated Seattle with Pete Carroll, and now obviously it's different. And he said, you don't know what to expect, and we think our coaches have done a good job of preparing us, but you don't know what it's going to look like. And he just said, I think physicality is going to win the game for us. That's really it. And so his thing is like, we're going to go up there and we're just going to hit hard until through the first quarter or whatever, until you sort of settle in and figure it out. And then it's more of a planned game from there. So all kinds of interesting stuff defensively, Ryan. I mean, you mentioned all the new, obviously the defensive front is part of that too. What do you think, with this Denver defensive front, and just like in general, how much of a difference does it make if that group is as much better than last year as we think it has a chance to be?
I think if the group is an improvement from last year, you might not be looking at another 1-5 start.
Yeah.
And that's the key right there. Like they struggled last year's group. They struggled to shut down a run. They struggled to put pressure on the quarterback. And you bring in John Franklin Myers. You got DJ Jones back, Zach Allen back. You get a solid run stopper, Malcolm Roach. So from a names perspective, is the defensive line looks much improved. Now we have to see how it looks in live action in meaningful games. And like I said, if there are improvement from last year, I don't think you see the Broncos starting out 1-5. I think it's going to be a lot better. I think they're going to be better at shutting down a run, and that's going to be the key right there. Is can they shut down a run, and can they put pressure on the quarterback? I think their success will also help you guys on the edge, and Nick, Jonathan, and Barron.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And that group is like, it's sort of interesting. Like we've written very little. I mean, you did for the magazine and a story about Nick Benito after one of the preseason games. Benito, by the way, has changed his number to 15. So if you wonder who that is running around out on the field on Sunday, that's Nick Benito, 15 instead of 42. But like that's a group, Ryan, that like frankly, like one of the things that happens in training camp is we end up writing a lot about the stuff that we don't know exactly how it's going to go, or where there's like a position battle or like something interesting. And I think like the outside linebacker group is interesting, but it was really stable through camp. Like Nick Benito missed some time early with a back injury, but like in general, we've known all along that it's going to be Jonathan Cooper and Baron Browning, Nick Benito, and then Jonah Ellis, the rookie third rounder. And they're just like, there's a little bit of a question, I guess, of like, how much of a cut above do the Broncos coaching staff sort of consider Browning and Cooper at this point? They're the starters, but like you would expect that the other two guys will play quite a bit too. And so like, that's a group that maybe like has flown under the radar a little bit this camp, just because, you know, attention, I guess, has been elsewhere, obviously at quarterback, but also at other positions where the picture just was less clear. So I'm very interested, you know, Cooper and Browning last year's of their rookie deals, obviously Ohio State teammates coming out in 21. And so like you have two extremely motivated players who have built themselves into contributors. And we don't know that, you know, either of them necessarily is primed for the breakout where it's like they're a true, you know, game wrecking number one edge rusher, but with the increased quality on the defensive line and the contract year thing, it's a really interesting group, and one that just hasn't got a lot of run so far over the last 6 weeks.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I think one of the biggest reasons for that is that you kind of I think you hit on it before. Like you kind of had an idea from the start of camp what your rotation was going to look like.
Yeah.
And even Sean Payton mentioned like a few weeks into training camp that Jonathan Cooper was going to be starting for the team before any depth chart came out. So you kind of knew like, all right, this is your group. For me, it's the key is like, are these guys going to evolve into like these dominant pass rushers, or is it more of, or this is just a solid quality group that you're just going to keep rotating? And you're not asking for Cooper or Browning to be Von Miller. Like I think that's too much to ask, but they haven't had a double digit sack leader since Vaughn and Bradley Chubb. So, and Nick took some strides last year, getting 8 sacks after in his sophomore year. Jonathan Cooper had 8.5. So it's like their trajectory is going up. It's just now a matter of, all right, where can we see consistent pressure from these guys? Where if it's not a sack, are they creating enough pressure on the quarterback to keep them off balance? I thought, especially with Browning and Cooper, I thought they had a really solid camp. I thought Browning would look really good, especially now that he's fully healthy after missing time last year through the offseason surgery. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think you talk about this young and hungry team. I think that's the same for the edge guys, because they're getting to this point in their careers where they're looking for another contract. They're looking to elevate their game and say, hey, we can be franchise cornerstones. And this is the time to prove it. And I wrote about this before. It's like, there seemed to be a trust within the coaching staff with this rotation, because they passed on 3 of the top edge rushers in the draft. So granted, they ended up getting a franchise quarterback. That's the most important thing. But still, that's always going to be like, that's still going to be one of the things to remember about that draft. They did pass on Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, and Ladu. So it's going to be interesting if they can take that next step. I think they can. I'm looking forward to it. I think Nick Benito has a lot of talent. You want to see him improve as a run defender. That's something he wanted to do. And he mentioned he worked on this offseason, and it's going to be interesting to see. I think they have it's a unique group because I think there's some upside there.
There is, and it's an interesting one. I mean, they're not the only position on the Broncos roster that's like this. I mean, receivers like this a little bit too, but it's a group where it's like you feel like you have functional depth, and you're just not sure if you have like a true number one. In fact, I mean, at this point, you would say they don't. And then if one of those guys develops into that, then that would be obviously terrific for the Broncos. That would be a good problem to have. It'd be a very expensive good problem to have if that was what, Baron Browning blossomed into this year or something like that. But, it's a collection of largely, I mean, similar type of players. Baron Browning, 3rd round pick. Nick Bonito, late 2nd round pick. Jonah Ellis, 3rd round pick. Drew Sanders, when if we see him more like middle of the season after the offseason Achilles injury, and whether he's outside or inside, early 3rd round pick, like they're all sort of like they're good players, good prospects, but there's a reason why they weren't, 1st round edge rushers. And so that's the kind of like that group to me is a little bit of a wild card on the defense, even though it's one that's had some stability, just in the sense of like, if you get a really good year from that group, all of a sudden the front seven really looks, almost formidable, at least rock solid. And so that's kind of the like, one of the things, just there's so many things to watch when you go out and play for the first time. But to me, like whether the defensive front, those 5 guys, and then obviously the inside linebackers, like if they can hold up in the run, like if the momentum that group has felt through camp and the preseason, if that persists into week 1, then you start thinking, okay, well, maybe it's a better group than last year. Maybe it's not, you're not in for quite the roller coaster ride of the horrible start, the turnover binge, and then struggling down the stretch. And that's all, like the Broncos need every bit of that if you're going to try to surprise teams, with a rookie quarterback and starting, honestly, not only on the road, but 3 out of 4 on the road to start. So what else, Ryan? Are you interested in the kickoff rule, or did the Thursday night opener where neither team even really tried it, has that already zapped your enthusiasm about the new rule?
My interest is starting to fade away. Is like I remember the preseason game. I was kind of interested because like Jalen Virgil like broke off for like a big gain on a kick return to start the second half, and I was like, oh, this could be interesting. And then you got Marvin Mims, and you got a lot of other guys that the Broncos expect to help in the kickoff game as well. That has a lot of speed that could probably make plays, and I'm like, oh man, will they even? What would that even look like? So I'm curious to see how it would look like from a Broncos standpoint, because Marvin Mims did make some pretty good plays as a returner last year, and if he does get those opportunities, I would love to see him use that speed into play. But outside of that, I think another thing is going back to the edge rushers. I'm interested to see how that group shapes up, because I think if there is more stability within that group and there's better production, to me, the season looks a little bit different than 5 to 6 wins that everyone's projecting the Broncos to finish with. So the season looks a little bit different. Like I said, I don't see another 1-5 start if that front seven is solid. But another thing to look at is Riley Moss. That's sure. Right there. I think if you remember the first 6 games of last year, the way teams were just going at Damari Mathis to the point where they had to make that change and put in Fabian Moreau. That's going to be key.
Yep.
That's going to have another cornerback there in the back end of the field to help in the passing game when teams are trying to avoid pass return. That's going to be key. And like we've seen it in practice. We've seen in the practice that we saw Riley Moss speed. You see his athleticism. You go back to his time in Iowa, he has really good ball skills, which the Broncos need in the secondary.
Yeah.
You lose Justin Simmons, who was the guy that you relied on heavily to generate those picks. Riley Moss did a good job in creating turnovers in Iowa. Don't know if that's going to translate in the NFL. We're going to see, but you're going to need someone who can make those plays on the ball, especially when Surtain is not getting that many opportunities to secure those interceptions. So that's right there. I think, and it's even more essential that Riley Moss steps up, because you already got Damari Mathis dealing with that ankle injury. You got Levi Wallace just coming back from the hamstring injury. So yeah, you're going to really need Riley Moss, especially early on, and that's going to be big. That's a 3rd-round pick from last year. So they've had high expectations from this guy the moment they drafted him and believe that. And where a lot of people, when he came into the league, thought, oh, he's just going to switch to safety. And Sean Payne said, no, we think he's going to be an outside cornerback. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Riley Moss handles this bigger role, especially after not hardly playing last year. He dealt with the core muscle injury. Then when he kind of get that rookie treatment that Sean Payne gave most of those guys last year, didn't play a ton of defensive snaps. So now you go from 23 defensive snaps to now in a starting role. This is it. I love to see how this shapes up, because to me, I think he has all the tools. He has the skill set, the speed and athleticism. But now it's like it's week 1. We want to see how this shapes up, because he's among those players that where if they actually live up to the expectations the team has for them, you are looking at a more competitive team and a team that will have a different record by the end of the year if these guys elevate their game to the next level.
Yeah, and Riley, they traded up for him last year. They traded like a 3rd-round equivalent pick almost to get him. So a guy that they obviously really believed in. One of the things, Ryan, this is like, you're in the locker room, you're talking to these guys, and like one of the things about Riley Moss that you notice, whether you're standing next to him or whether you're out on the field watching him, is like he has really good sort of like play length. Like he's tall, he's got long arms. And one of the things Sean Payton said over the course of camp is like, you earn your completions against him because it's a lot harder to throw the ball over the head of a guy who's 6'1" and has long arms than it is, against shorter corners, even guys that can really run. And so, Riley's got the combination of athletic tools and then also just like, physically he's a big corner. And so he's going to need all of that and more opposite Pat, because I think it's twofold. Basically they're compounding issues where if you're giving up easy completions, teams are just going to take as many of those as they can get so that they don't have to look number 2's way, and then sort of like conversely, and that just sort of builds on itself, right? And then conversely, if you show that it's not just going to be, hey, you can throw the ball to this side, then at some point quarterbacks feel the need to like, well, I have to go somewhere else with it too. I at least have to keep it honest. And that's when you see more balls thrown Pat's way, more opportunities for him to make plays on the ball. And so it really does matter. Same thing. I mean, defense is just so intertwined, right? Like it'll help those guys in the back end, especially like a relatively untested safety group, at least in Denver, besides PJ Locke. It'll help those guys a lot if the pass rush is better. One of the differences between good secondary play and bad secondary play is how long the quarterback is sitting back there, with time to throw. So it all goes together, and that's the beautiful thing about week 1, man. We get to turn the lights on and all find out together.
Oh yeah, and you touched on that on the safety group. We're going to like that's another part. We just don't know what to get. We kind of have an idea what PJ Locke provides, but how does Brandon Jones look alongside him? Brandon Jones is a guy, like when you look back when he was in Miami, they used him a lot in like as a blitzer, and he talked about that and said, hey, I want to be more than that. And let's see how that brings. Is he going to be someone that can make more plays on the ball? So that's another interesting component. It's so many. That's why like this game is so intriguing. And it's not like one of the games. It's not like KC and Baltimore.
Right.
Or tonight's game between the Packers and the Eagles. But it's just so intriguing because you don't know what to expect. You have a rookie quarterback, rookie coach, so many different pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Guys who are playing bigger roles than they had in years past in their career. So it's like you don't really know what's going to expect. I think it's going to be a fun game, and it's like you just got to keep an open mind when you're watching these guys. I think maybe by week 3 he might have an idea of how this Broncos team will look or what to expect from this group. But yeah, this one's like I don't know, because you don't know what to expect from Riley Moss. You don't know what to expect from Brandon Jones in a much larger role here in Denver. You have a revamped defensive line. It's intriguing to see. And then like one thing for here is like one thing about Sean Payton is he going to be someone outside of Bo Nix to let these young guys spread their wings and fly? Or we're going to see how much of Chris Abrams Dre we're going to see on the defensive side of the ball? How much we're going to see of Aldrich Estime? How much of like with Samaje Perine going? How does that change Jaleel McLaughlin's role in the backfield? I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a fun game.
Yep, no doubt. Before we go, Ryan, prediction?
I predicted Seattle over Denver 21-20. I think it's gonna be a close game. I think Bo Nix is gonna put up some decent numbers, but I think at the end of the day, I'm banking on the experience of the Seattle Seahawks and Mike Macdonald to get his first win as a coach.
Yep, pretty much the same. I was thinking close, relatively low scoring, probably Seahawks at home. Just a tough environment to go win in, especially early in the season. And then I was thinking about it, Ryan. The Broncos have lost each of their last two season openers, 17-16. So I figured I'd just go with that, make it 3 in a row, 17-16, Seattle. But, obviously, like, it feels like there's a lot more unknown about this group than last year. So, and we've obviously talked about that quite a bit today. So, in that regard, like almost nothing will be like a complete shock because you're just seeing it for the first time. So it's going to be fascinating. We'll be there, denverpost.com/Broncos, all the latest. We'll be back to talk to you next week. For Ryan McFadden, I'm Parker Gabriel. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you guys soon.